So we got just a couple things to go here. Here we are on April 10th. So today is about sending email and text messages. So we'll be talking about sending text messages as well. Then we have managing files on Wednesday. Next Monday, automating solver. And then a week from Wednesday, what do we have? Final exam. So final exam will also be available later. We'll have to see how many people want to take it after the last day of class. We may just hold it at the normal time at April 26th, which is our final exam day. Or if there's a few people, we might be able to schedule individual times to come and take it. We'll just see how it goes. So I have to send an email out about this last week. I'll try to send it out tomorrow. Questions on the rest of the schedule? Yes?
So if you're not going to take the final, do we have to just let you know that we're not taking it? Or?
If you're not going to take the final, the way you tell me you're not taking the final is by not taking the final.
Okay.
Because if I don't have a grade for you for the final exam, I know how to calculate your grade, which is to kind of look and see if you had enough attendance and however that works out. So, yeah, in fact, you could be done. If you're not taking the final, no reason to be in class today other than just to learn. Unless you've already had 6 absences, then you probably should stick around. At least until you've done attendance, and then you can leave. All right. What was that? You would wish you hadn't spent your absences already?
That's right.
Could be done with this class. All right, a couple of files to download. So let's download sendeemail.xlsm. Things are just a little bit too involved to... a little too involved to kind of write this all up from scratch today in class. We've got some code. We'll go through the code so you'll see what it does. But we've got that. That's a starting point. And we'll also want this file downloaded to the same place. If you just follow this link, chances are it's going to open it up here in a browser. It's a text file. So instead, for that email message.txt, I'm going to right-click it and say Save Link As. I'd say Save Target As, depending on your browser. And then I'll save this in the same location. All right. So, just got his attendance recorded and set it up. So, let's first kind of talk about high level what we're going to do. So the whole idea here is to say we want Excel to be able to send off an email message or to send off a text message. The example we're doing today is like a mail merge. We've got a bunch of data. We've got to send it to a bunch of different people. We have a message. We want to send a bunch of different people with different parameters in it. We want to send that out. But it's not necessarily just a mail merge that you want to do this with. So it might be that you've got, here's an example. I might have told you. Did I tell you about the guy who made $6,000 selling the saxophone using Excel to find it? There's a student who wrote a program that would just, every 5 minutes or so, it would look on KSL, do a search on KSL for particular kinds of instruments, that he knew a lot about and he could sell. And so he just set it up so that when a particular kind of instrument was listed at a particular price, it would send him a text. Excel would send him a text message. And so, it's just kind of running all the time, just checking KSL. And it said, oh, look, here's a saxophone. It only costs $5,000. I look at a saxophone that costs $5,000 and I go, yeah, I'm not even thinking about that. But he looks at it and goes, this thing's worth $15,000 easy. And so, and occasionally people will list things on KSL without really knowing what they're worth, and it'll be a place to make some money. So he got a text message. I think it might send him a link to the thing he looked at and went, oh, yeah, I got to buy that. And so he bought it straight away. Sold it the next week, sold it for like $5,000, sold for $11,000 or something, and just made $5,000. So, it's something different. Excel's just kind of there running, and then some condition happens, and he needs to know about it, even though he's not there watching his program. So there are other ways to do an email merge, which is what we're doing here, but just realize it's a generalizable thing. Okay, so we are going to use Gmail. The book talks about using it with Outlook, and it turns out when you're using Outlook, you just, yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, so he would have had to have his computer running.
Yeah, he had a computer back in his apartment. I don't think he had another one besides his laptop. Yeah, just had Excel, always on, just, looking. Anyone post anything yet? No. Anything probably like for days. It's just going 5 minutes. No. No. And then the one came in. Okay. Yeah, $5,000. I worked all semester for $5,000. When I was a student. Maybe even longer. I don't remember. Probably a lot longer now that I think of it. Okay. So here's the thing. I don't think very many of you use Outlook. How many of you use Outlook for your email?
Word.
Word.
I hate it.
What's that?
Word. I hate it.
Word?
Work.
Oh, for work. Oh, I use Word for email. No, you use Word for mail. If you print something and put it in an envelope and send it, that's use it for work. Okay. So how many of you use Gmail or have a Gmail account? Okay. So that's the way we're going to do it here in class today. It turns out it's a really different approach to use Outlook because you're automating Outlook. Outlook knows all about sending messages. There are methods and properties you can use with Outlook just to send messages. It's really pretty easy, and the book does a good job of talking us through it. It's a little more involved to do it with Gmail because we have to create objects that interact with the mail server that we're working with. And so that's what we're going to do. Now, it turns out that Gmail, there's kind of two levels of security that Gmail says, yeah, we don't just want you sending email from Excel. The whole idea is that Google is trying to say, people abuse email. They send spam, they send viruses through email. We'd like to make sure that we are pretty sure that if you sent the email, if the email came from your account, you're the one who sent it, not somebody else. And so, by default, your Gmail account says, you're going to authenticate using Gmail, not some third-party email client. It used to be that you had to install software on your computer that could work with a mail server. The guys at Gmail said, they weren't the first ones to do it, they said, you know what, we can just do this all with the browser. But when they're authenticating you with their browser, they have a lot more control over what they're paying attention to know, hey, is this really you? Specifically, they're going, where are you logging on? Look, you're logging on from the same computer you logged on to a lot of times. You're logging on from the same city you log on all the time. It has all this information. They say, well, we think this is you. How many of you got a message from Google at some point saying, we just had a blocked attempt for logging on. Someone just tried to log on with your credentials in Zimbabwe, and we blocked it. Anyone happen to you? Yeah, someone really did try to use your account, and Google said, no, we're not going to do it. It happened 2 or 3 times to me. It happens every once in a while when I try to log in, and they block me. They say, we don't think this is you, because I'm somewhere else. And I go, yeah, it really is. So they've got a lot going on where they say, we can be relatively sure it's you. But if you're using an email client to do this, all we get is username and password. And that's not enough for us. We're not going to let you do that. Unless you specifically tell us that's going to be okay. Unless you tell Gmail, allow less secure apps to integrate with my Gmail server. And so what we're about to do with Excel is we are going to use that secondary approach to authentication, providing just a username and password. And so Gmail will reject the login unless we've told it to allow this kind of authentication. So that's the first thing we've got to do. Now, how many of you are using two-factor authentication? You go to log in, it sends you a text message. Just a few of you here, so we'll do it. We'll have to do it for you anyway for the video. So that's a different approach. We have to do it a different way for you. So if you log into Gmail with just a username and password, you need to do what I'm about to do. Follow the link right here, the first one that says Allow Less Secure Apps. Under Gmail settings right here in Today. You're going to follow that link. That will take you to a page where Google's talking about what all this less secure apps business is. And then you're going to follow the link down here that says go to the less secure apps section. So you'll follow that link, and it's just a switch. Allow less secure apps. Mine's already on. Yours is probably off. Change it to on. It really is less secure. You might want to change it back to off at the end of class today. But that's what we're doing. Okay, so that's what you have to do if you authenticate at Gmail with username and password. If you have two-factor authentication, it's a different game altogether. In fact, I need to log into a different account where I use that. So gmail.com, and I use two-factor authentication here. And the password authentication. Okay. So now, if I'm using two-factor authentication, I'm going to follow this link that says app passwords. Here's the idea. Google realizes, this is a lot more secure. You got to know your username and your password, and we're going to send you a text message. You got to have your phone with you. If someone's going to break this, stealing a set of usernames and passwords isn't going to do it, because they've got to steal your phone as well. But they say, well, there may be other things you need to do that can't deal with two-factor authentication, like send an email through Excel. And so what you can do is you can have Excel generate a password just for that application. And that's what this avenue is going to let us do. It's called an app password. So I'm going to follow that link. We're using two-step verification. We are. I'm going to come down to where it says how to generate an app password. I'll follow that link. I'm going to open up that group, and then I'll follow this link. I've got to do it over here in my account where I'm using two-factor authentication. Wants to know who I am again. And here's the one that I created for last class. I'm going to revoke that one. And now I'm going to say, I've got one set up for something else. But now I'm going to say, need a new app. What app is it going to be? It's not Calendar, Contacts, or YouTube. It's going to be something else. I'll give it a name. Excel, E-X-E-L, mail. And generate. This then is going to give me a password. I don't get to pick it. That's the password I got to use. And if I say done before I've copied it, it's dead. There's no way to recover it. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go park it over here in Notepad. And that's the password that I'm going to use here in just a minute. So if you're using two-factor authentication, what we've just set up is we've set up a single-factor authentication channel just for us to use here. It's your username and this funky password. What's so great about it? Well, it never gets stored in. That's why it's not recoverable. It never gets stored anywhere. They send it to your browser and they're done. They're done with it. So it can't be stolen. That's why this is kind of okay. I mean, people on YouTube who are watching this video could steal it because they could look at it right here. Especially if I forget to delete that or whatever. So hopefully you remember at the end of the class to delete it. But they're not going to steal it from Google because Google doesn't save it. All right. So now I think we should have our accounts set up to be able to send email through Excel. So it's time to go ahead and open up the email or the Excel file, sendemail.xls. So here's the idea. Here's kind of the backdrop for where we're headed. What the example that we're doing here. Suppose that you've been hired by the National Highway Transportation Safety Bureau to look into complaints about in braking systems. So imagine that you're driving down the road and your car just quits working the way it's supposed to work. The steering wheel starts to shake uncontrollably and you can't steer with it. You go to hit the brakes and the pedal goes to the floor. What are you going to do? So, assuming you live through the ordeal, what are you going to do? You'll probably complain to the manufacturer, but you're probably also going to say, you know what, we need some oversight here. You might write a letter to the National Highway Transportation Safety Bureau. And they collect all this information. I downloaded this information like in 1999, so it's kind of old. Or maybe 2000 or something. We got some from year 2000. But here's the idea. Evelyn Sabo, that's not really her name. They don't really disclose their name, so I had to bring some names in. They don't really provide emails for people that log in either, so I put some emails in here. These are real email addresses. They all go to me. So when we get to where we're actually sending messages, you should put an email address in here that you can access, so you can see that it's working for you. I don't really need to have thousands of emails coming in. But a complaint came in from Finksburg, Maryland. Who names a town Finksburg? Probably the Finks. So on February 12th, 2000, they made a report of some problem. The manufacturer of the car they complained about was the Daimler Chrysler Corporation. Daimler and Chrysler, I don't think they're together anymore. But it was a Jeep Cherokee, 1990 Jeep Cherokee that failed. This is really interesting. It failed March 1st, 1992. When did they write the report? Like the year 2000. 8 years after this happened, we're making a complaint. It has to do with the brakes. 2 people were injured. And then here's the summary, the C summary, the complaint summary. Paint is peeling off in sheets. Kind of funny that throwing that in, by the way. And the brakes don't slow the vehicle consistently. Sometimes when you push the brakes, it's like you don't have brakes at all, but and these are like truncated. I'm not sure where I got truncated. When pulling into a turning lane, went to apply the brakes and the pedal went all the way to the floor. The ABS failed during loss of control and accident. YH, or YH means. Anyway, so you have this. These are all injury. I think I only filtered for injury accidents. 4 people injured in dry road conditions on I-5 northbound. We noticed that traffic was stopping ahead. This person's probably a novelist, giving all kinds of reasons. It was a dark and stormy night. I lost the line I was in. Line number 10. Stopping ahead of us and applied the brakes. We already slowed to approximately 50 miles an hour before brake. I just want to know what happened to those poor folks. Anyway. Okay, so our job is going to be, listen, we want to reach out to these folks and say, I've been assigned to your case, and I'm here to help. If you can remember anything else, contact me. We're at the National Highway Transportation Safety Bureau. We take safety seriously. But you got to send them, this message. And so that's what we're about to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at the code. So I'm going to bring up my code editor. And we've got a subprocedure called send mail. This is just, it turns out that in solving this problem over the years, I've declared so many variables, I got tired of declaring all the variables. And so I gave you the variables that we're going to use already declared. We'll use them, but you don't have to declare them. So we're really starting from scratch here. But there's a module here called mod Gmail. What I want to do is read through this code. I used to actually write this code from scratch with the students, but it was all we could do to barely get this thing working so we can get to see any application. So let's take a look at the code that we have here. And I guess I'm going to zoom in for this. I'm not going to zoom in. Try to change the font size for us. Sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. Today it doesn't. Okay. Can we see it okay? Well, I'll talk you through it, and if you really want to go back and look at it, you don't have to actually type me this, so just listen. You got it on the video. Okay, so we have a function. It's called sendGmail. We're going to send it, and this is just a function that I've written. We're going to give it several parameters. Email address we're sending it to. Email address that we're using to authenticate at Gmail to send the message. Password that we're using to authenticate and send the message. Subject and body of the message. And optionally, we can provide the path to an attachment. You want to attach a file? This will attach a file to the message as well. You want to attach 2 files? You're out of luck. We're going to attach 1 file. You'll see the code down here. It's not too hard to make it attach more than 1 file, but it was just kind of beyond what I wanted to do with this example. You could change this to make it add more than 1 file. We declare some variables here. We have, let's look at this one first. This is just a string variable. It's called schema. And it's just because as we identify different parts of the configuration, they all start with this long string that's the same. And so I said, I don't want to have the lines really wide, so we'll just make that a variable. We'll put in the part that we use to identify that part of the configuration, and then we'll just use schema, the part that's the same for all of them, as a variable in front of the part that's different. It just helps make this code a little bit more readable. We then have 2 object variables, a message object that will actually be our email message, and then a configuration object that has all the information we need to hook up to the email server. We'll then say we've got our message built, we're going to hook that up to a connection, and we're going to send the message, and it should successfully communicate with the outbound mail server, dispatch the message, and let us know that it was successful. All right, so in terms of configuring, here's what we have to go through. Maybe I will try to zoom in for this one. So, oh, by the way, this is a different way to create objects than we've seen so far. Typically, when we've created objects that are not native to Excel, we've added a reference, right? We say tools, references, and then we pick some library that we want to say we're including a reference to. That's called early binding. We're binding to the objects that we're using while we're writing the code. Alternatively, we can wait to hook up to those objects until the code is running. That's called late binding. And that's what we're doing here. The advantage of early binding is that while we're writing the code, we have access, we know all the information about those variables. We get IntelliSense help. It'll show us the list of methods and properties we have to work with. The downside is that we actually have to include the reference to be able to make that work. With late binding, we say we've got a variable. In this case, the variable name is message. And we're just going to say, hey, create an object in the CDO library. The object class is called message. Create one of these objects. And so it ultimately gets us to a created object just the same. It's just kind of a different approach to get there. So the nice thing here is that you can take this code, paste it anywhere. You don't have to worry about setting any references. Same thing for a configuration. It's just a different kind of object that has methods and properties we want to work with. In fact, our configuration object has just a set of fields that we have to set up. So we're going to look at one field that's the send using. This says, hey, how are you going to, what method, what approach are you going to use to sending this message? And we're going to use approach number 2. It's called send using port. It just means we're going to supply a host name and a port to communicate. We've talked about this before when we were talking about working with databases. You've got to specify the computer you want to talk to, and you also have to say what port is the service listening on that computer. And that's the approach that we're going to take here as well. And that's what this says. There are other ways. I've never done any other way. That's the only way I've ever done. But apparently there are other ways. And I think if you're working with an Exchange server instead of a normal SMTP server, then you would use a different number here. Okay, so then we have a property called, or a field named SMTP server. What's the host name? Here it is, smtp.gmail.com. And that's the name of the outbound server, the server for outbound mail. Is that the only one they have? Just one? Well, it turns out that when you ask for the IP address for this host, you will get one of the email addresses that, or one of the host IP addresses that Google uses for outbound mail. No telling which one you'll get, but they'll give you one. And so you'll be working with a particular machine. The port that the SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol server is listening on that server is port 465. So we got to tell it, talk to this machine, and communicate on this port. We're going to tell it to use basic authentication. That's the way that Gmail is listening. We're going to specify who it's from. Now that from is a variable, and it's a variable that we have specified. It's a variable that we specified up here. So from is a parameter that's passed in, as well as password. And so we're using those passed in to set the username and password to be able to connect to the server. The last thing that we're asking for the connection is, are we going to use a secure socket layer? In other words, are we going to encrypt the traffic between the client that we're using here and the mail server? The answer is yes. Gmail doesn't accept the traffic if it's not encrypted. And so we've got to tell it to be encrypted. So use SSL is going to be true. We then tell it to update those fields. And that configuration now is ready to be used. We haven't connected onto the mail server yet. All we've done is said, we've said we've got a configuration. So that when we send the message, we'll tell it to use this configuration, and it should try to connect it to that mail server to dispatch the message. Next step is to configure the message. And so we have built here, we've made the new instance of the message object. And now down here, we are ready to start filling in the properties of this object. So it's got a to property. And send to and from, these are just, in fact, all four of these, send to, from, subject, and body, these are all passed into this function. And so here's send to, subject, body, they're all right here. So there's no magic here. We're just saying whatever got passed into this function, we're going to use that to create the message. I do want to point out there's some other options here that we're not using, but depending on your mail server, these might be meaningful. So I just left them in here. But this one I do want to talk about. We're going to be sending text today just as plain text. But if you wanted your email message to look fancy with, like, pictures and fonts and everything, then you could actually format an HTML message, and you can put that in the HTML body instead of the text body, and it will show as HTML. Question over here.
So you created this, so you created this message object?
I didn't create the message object. So the message object is just part of the Windows operating system. So it's in the library called CDO, Common Data Objects, and it's just there, and we're accessing it. What I created here was the function send to Gmail that's calling these. How did I know how to write this? Truth is, I Googled it, found an example, and said that's pretty close. I'm going to change it to do what I want it to do. Now, in terms of sending Gmail, this thing's already configured. That's why the function is called send Gmail. But if you had to set this up to work with your own company's mail server, then you'd have different parameters here. It's not going to be smtp.gmail.com. It's not going to be port 465. Well, it might. So how do you find that out? You talk to the IT guys and say, I got to configure a mail client. What are the parameters we need to configure the mail client? They'll give that information to you. Okay, so we've said here's the subject, here's the body, and now we're going to add the attachment. So attachment is an optional parameter. That's the keyword optional. You don't have to give it an attachment. If I don't supply an attachment, what do you think the attachment variable is going to be? What's it going to have in it? It'll be the default value for a string variable, which is a zero-length string. And so I'm looking over here and I'm asking, hey, if there's something more than a zero-length string, that means it gave me a path to the file to attach. I just call the addAttachment method, pass it that path, it'll find that file and attach it in. Now, you see here it's a method. I can add another attachment just by calling this again. My function won't do that, it just takes one, but it's a pretty simple modification if you wanted to have 2 or 3. Or even pass it like a pipe delimited string. You can split it by the pipes, you can make that into an array, you can iterate across the array and add just as many as there are. This one just adds one. Now, we take the message and we say there's a configuration property. We want to take the configuration object that we set up here. It's got all the information to connect. And we're going to set that into the configuration property of the message that we just created. Once we've done that, we're ready to send the message. And so I'm setting up an error trap. On error, resume next. It says, hey, if there's an error, ignore it and move on. And then I send the message. Called the send method of the message object. So send that message. Now, that might give me an error. Can you think of a reason why it might give me an error? I'll give you just a second. Why might this give an error? What could possibly go wrong?
The email address is invalid.
The email address I'm trying to send it to is not valid. In fact, that would cause an error. When I say send, I'm communicating with the email server, the SMTP outgoing mail server, and I say, here's a message to send. Will you accept it? And it looks over it, and it goes, I like that message. I'll deliver it for you. But in that initial check, it's going to say, it's looking at the email address, it's going, there's not even an @ in the email address. I can't deliver this. And it would give an error. So that's one of the things that could fail. What else might go wrong? My password could be wrong. My email address could be wrong. Could be a problem with my network connection. Lots of things could be wrong. And so it's going, if any of those things happen, it's going to fail. And I'll get, my error object will get a number. But what does it mean if the error number is 0? It means there's no error. And so if it means that mail server has accepted the message to be transmitted. So all I want to do in this case is set the name of my function equal to true. This is a Boolean function. It has Boolean. It's going to return true or false. The name of it is send Gmail. It's going to return true or false. And so if there's no error, I'm just saying true. That means it was successful. You said send, it said true. I sent it. It was successful. Now, if there's any other message, it's going to return false, and I'm printing up a message to the immediate window so I can see what the problem is. Question? Okay. Then, end of the error trap. We release the memory that we had for creating those objects, and we're done. So that's it. It's a lot more than we want to write in class, but this should send a message if we're ready to go. Questions on the code that we're going to use to actually send the message? Okay, so I want to send a message pretty quickly just to make sure that we've got this working for everybody. The trouble is, I gotta specify a password. I'm not thrilled about the idea of displaying my password. This one I can delete, but my main password that I'm going to use to send I don't want to use. So, let's come back to our module 1. And actually, we're going to view Project Explorer. I have given you a form. It's called Form Password. It takes just what comes before the @gmail.com for your Gmail and your password. And notice what happens if you click OK, it just hides the form. But if you click Cancel, it's going to clear off the password. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up this form, let the user type some stuff in, and then I'm going to check to see if there's a password. If there's no password, I'm not going to try to do anything else. Either means they canceled or they didn't give me a password. Either way, I can't do it. And so I'm going to get out. So that's how I'm going to tell that the user could cancel or no. Am I ready to proceed? So let's just go ahead and set that up right here. How do I show that form? The name of the form is form password. Form password.show. That will show the form and it will suspend execution of the code until that form gets closed or hidden, unloaded or hidden. I'm going to check to see if there's a password. I mean, if there's a if there's a password. If frm password .txt password .text is equal to a zero-length string, what do I want to do? Nothing. Zero-length string, I'm done. Exit sub. Oops. Then exit sub. Otherwise, it means I know I've got a password. I'm going to assume that there's a username. If not, I'll get an error message, and that's okay. So now I've declared a couple of variables here, UN and PW. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the username and password into those two variables. UN equals form password. Oops. .txt. It's called txt account. .text. And pw equals form password .text password .text. Oops. .text. So I've collected the username and password. So far, so good? So now that I've got that, let me just go ahead and try to send off a message. I'm going to first send off a message using my account that does not require two-factor authentication. So it should just be my regular username and password. So debug.print, and I'm going to send Gmail. Why am I saying debug.print to this function? Because the function returns true or false. I'd like to see which one did it return, true or false. So debug.print, send Gmail. And so who am I going to send it to? Let's send it to the gov. At gmail.com. You feel free to use your own email address here if you're following along. Gmail. Who is it from? Oh, actually on my username, the user has typed in whatever and then not the @gmail.com. But I need to supply the @gmail.com, so I'm going to concatenate that on here when I make the variable. @gmail.com. And @gmail. So now the next argument is who's it coming from? And that's going to be my username. Password is PW. Subject is a great message. And then the next argument is the body. Hello. I guess you got to make sure I send a message that doesn't get filtered off by Google's spam filter. Where did you hide bodies? Where did you hide the bodies? Okay, so when I run this, it should put up the user form, prompt me for username and password, and then send this message to the gov@gmail.com. I guess I'll open up Firefox so I can read that. You get logged in, so I can see that message when it comes. Let's go to Gmail. Who am I logged in as already? I don't know. Oh, cool. I even have this account showing. I read this account about once a year when I do this example, twice a year. So, the gov. All right, so here's the two messages I sent to myself in the last class. I'm just going to delete those. All right, should be ready. I run this, it asks for an account. I'm going to use my regular account. This is the one that I use without two-factor authentication. I'll put in my password. That should send the message. And it reported true. It means the mail server accepted the message that I was trying to send. Come back over here. Here's a great message. Hello, where did you hide the bodies? The message went through okay. Great. So, first test, kind of there and working. Questions? Do you use two-factor authentication or one-factor authentication? What message? Did you print a message in the meeting window?
Yeah, send it. Oh,
What was it, username?
the user form is
All right, one more time for that same message, but just using my other account that uses two-factor authentication. I will use the app password that I created. And hopefully that will go through. That looks like it went through okay. And there's the message now from the Colonial Heritage Foundation. Same message. So the key is, if you're using that two-factor authentication, you must have set up an app password and use that password with your username to authenticate to send the message. All right. So far so good. Now, we actually want to do what we came here to do. And that is to integrate the ability to send a message with all of this information. So I'm going to begin by opening that text file. We've seen how to do this a couple of times, although we really haven't studied it. It's actually the topic for the next class. Let's just go ahead and put the code in the next that opens that text file again. So I've got a variable up here called template path. So I'm going to first get figured out where this file is that I'm working with. So template path equals this workbook dot path concatenated with backslash the name of the file. What was that text file called? Email message.txt. Is that it, right like that? Okay, so now that I've got that variable set, I can say open template path for input. I'm going to be bringing data into my program, so it's called input, as number 1. Remember that this approach to working with files is old, back to the 1970s. We didn't have objects and methods as a part of BASIC then, and so to keep different files separate, we numbered them. We might have 3 or 4 files open at the same time. They all have a different number. In this case, we have just one. So we open it as number 1, and then we're going to close. When we're done, we'll close number 1. Then, inside this, we're going to do the reading. We want to read that variable. We want to read that data into a variable. Well, if we look up, we'll see there's a variable called template. So template equals input. So the input statement says we've got to tell it which file we want. That's the second parameter. I'll do that one first. So comma 1. I'm telling it to read from file number 1. I open the file as number 1. I'm reading this from file number 1. But the first argument for input is how many characters do I want to read off of that file? If I said 100 characters, it would read the first 100 characters off that file and it would bring them back in. If I want to read them all, I have to tell it how many characters there are. Fortunately, there's a function called length of file, LOF, where I tell it the file number, and it will return the number of characters in that file. So this will read that whole file, put it into my template variable.
Question.
Yes?
Is the length of profile, you develop that formula or is
Say that question again.
LOF formula?
Oh, LOF, yeah. Where did this come from? This is one of the 80-odd procedures or functions that are built into the VBA language. Yeah. The vast majority of what we do is we're calling methods of objects. But there are parts of this that are the language. The open statement is one of the statements that's part of the language. LOF is part of the language. Okay. That's all we're doing. We're opening that file to be able to read the characters in. I should be able to say debug.print template here. And put a breakpoint before I send this message. I'll run this. It opens up my form for the password. That's okay. I say okay. And now I've gotten past that. It should have printed that template. Here it is. Problem with your model year, make, model name. You know, if I got a message that said, problem with your 1999 Ford F350, which is a car I drive, I would probably think, wow, whoever sent this to me knows exactly the kind of car that I drive. I would probably think very hard about opening this message. Chances are I'd probably open it. Especially if it looked like who it was from, I thought it seems like it's from a reputable place. I got an email today that said someone tried to deliver a package to me. And they couldn't deliver it. It was somewhere else. And I had to fill out this form, this mailing form, to be able to get it delivered the rest of the way. I opened the message, read the message, and I almost clicked on the attachment when I went, you know what, this doesn't quite pass the sniff test. I looked at it a little more closely. There's grammar errors in the message. I'm going, yeah. And then I looked at it. It was a doc file. It was a Word file. I'm going, there's no way I'm opening it. I would just probably open the message if someone knew exactly what kind of query. So that's going to be that message. We've set this up for the message to be the first line of that file. And then the next line begins the subject will be the first line of the message. Subject is the first line of the file, and then everything else is the message. So, dear Evelyn, when I heard about the trouble you had with your 1999 Jeep Cherokee, I was deeply troubled. Very sincere letter. I'll recently be assigned to your case. I wanted to give you my contact information, whatever. Okay. So, of course, we've got to parameterize this. And yeah, this is a little bit of busy work right now. But let's go ahead and get that ready. So we've got the template here. We brought the template in. We're now ready. Let's see. Yeah, we've got the template. I think we're now ready to fill in the actual data. So let's go ahead and create a loop. Again, we've done this a bunch of times. We've got a variable defined as R. Do until. Now, this one's a little bit strange, but I have named the sheet. There's a data sheet that has all the information on it that we've looked at. I've named it letter. You can name this just by clicking on this, and if your properties window is open, you can just set the name of that object right here. So that's the sheet name. So do until letter.cells row sub R, row R, column D. That's where the email address is. So I know there's always going to be an email address until that the value of that cell is equal to a zero length string. Better increment R. R equals R plus 1. Do events in here. All right, so we've set up the basic structure of a loop that's going to loop across these. Question? Do I need the extra L? Oh, cells it. Nope, thank you. All right, now I've set up several variables here. Actually, from email down to agent name and agent phone. I'm just going to copy those declarations down here just so I can get at the variable names. So I really just want to have these down here because I'm going to give a value into each one of these variables. Okay, so the email is in column D. The model year is in column K. Model year is in K. A little hard to do zoom in. I'm going to zoom out for this while I use it. In fact, all of these are going to come off of the cell somewhere. Failure, make, model name, first name, system, agent phone, agent name, and agent phone. Now let's leave those off for now. All right, so this is K. The fail year is the year of column L. I'm going to come in here for column L, but I don't want the whole date for that. I just want the year. So there's a function called year that will extract off the year of a date. That's fine. The make is in column I. That's the next one. The model is in column J. First name is in column 2. And the system, that's like the brakes. JKLM. It's in column M, but I don't want the whole thing. Maybe I do want the whole thing. I want the last of it. All right, let's just pull off that last, the anti-skid system. Do I have a variable that's a variant up here already? Is there a variant? I don't think there is. I'm just going to declare a variant here called data. Right before I do this last one, I'm going to say data equals split. Let me zoom in for this. Data equals split this from column M based on the colon. Right? Because this is a colon-separated string. Brakes, hydraulic, anti-skid system. And then what I want to actually put into system is data. And then I want the very last one. So at this point, data is an array. How can I ask the upper boundary of an array? So the ubound function will tell me the upper boundary of that array, so I'll just say, whatever the highest one is, that's the one I want to put in. So this will give me the last element from that block. There are other ways to do that, but that's kind of a quick way to do it. So at this point, I've now put into variables the email I'm sending it to, model year, the year it failed, make, model name, first name. I'm really ready to set most of those parameters that I have inside my text file, inside my template. So I think I'm ready to go ahead and parameterize, to actually fill in those parameters. So I've got a variable called message. So message equals replace, look at template, look for something, replace it with something. So I'm looking for, model year. And I want to replace it with the variable model year. Those variables are very intentionally named exactly the same as the angle bracket tags I have in my template. So that I can do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them pretty quickly. So I'm going to look for the fail year tag and replace it with a fail year variable. Do the same thing with make, replace it with a make variable. First name, system, did I skip one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Model name. Oops. If I go back to the template each time, I'm going back to my original copy, and I'll be overriding these changes I've made. So I have to look at the template the first time, but the second time I want to look at the message, and subsequent times I look at the message. I look at that raw template first, I put in the model year. Then I look at the message, which is now just like the template, but the model year is replaced, and kind of continually replace that information. So now, I think I'm ready to send the message.
Are we not changing the agent name and agent phone?
Yeah, so that agent name and agent phone, that's like yours. That's like your name, your phone number, and you can change those if you want. They should be changed before we actually email this to somebody. Have you ever gotten a message like that? The email message came through and it's clear they missed some of the tags in it. Or almost the same. Email comes and it's all lowercase except your name is all uppercase. Okay, now before I'm ready to send the message, I've got the subject and the body as two different arguments. So I'm going to have to split off the subject from the body. So it's kind of nice to have them all in one variable for the replace because I can replace it all together. I can replace model year and the subject as well in the body. But now I need to separate that off. So I'm going to say subject, again another variable that's defined up above, is, actually before I get to set the subject, I've got a position variable where I got to find out where the first carriage return sequence is. It's character number 13 followed by character number 10, but there's a constant built for that already in VBA. So I want to look at the in string, look in message, start at the first character, look in message, and look for VB new line. Then my subject is going to be the left of message. How many characters? Position -1. My message is going to be the mid of message, looking at position +2, because it's 2 characters. That carriage return sequence is 2 characters, non-printable characters. You don't see them. It's just when when Notepad sees those characters, it wraps down to the next thing. So now I've got an email. I've got the username and the password that's going to send it. I've got the email address we're sending it to. I've got the subject. I've got the message. I'm ready to send this message. Now the thing is that I want to behave differently if it returns true than I want to behave if it returns false. And so I'm going to have an if statement. If something, then we'll do something else. We'll do something else. So here's the neat thing. Because the send Gmail function returns true or false, I can just plug the call of the function right in here. So I'm going to copy that message from below. Actually, I'll cut it from below. I'll plug it right in here. So if send Gmail, now instead of sending it here, I'm going to send it to email. Have I made email? Yeah, email. I picked up the email from the data. Username and password. Subject is going to be subject. And then body is going to be message. Oops. So we're trying to send the message. It's going to return true or false. What should we do if it returns true? Well, what we want to do is we want to mark the fact that we've already sent that message. And so in column A, I'm just going to set the value equal to the time from the current time from the system clock. Now, if it failed, I want to put something else in there. I'm just going to put failed. I'm not sure why it failed. I require a little more investigation. Could be because I had a network problem. Could be the email address was no good. That should be it. So give it a shot. Oh, one more very important thing. If R is greater than 3, then exit do. Why? I really don't want to send myself, it's like 180 lines of data. I don't want 180 emails, let alone 180 times whoever is successful to get this code to run. So remember, all of these are aliases that come to my account. So change these to your email address so you can see it work. But I think I'm ready to run this. So let me just give it a shot. Ready for an account. gov.allen@gmail.com, password, and we'll say OK. Ooh, a type mismatch. What do we got going on? Failure. Didn't like something about the failure. That's column L. The year of this. What's R? R is 1. Oh, R needs to start at 2. Sorry. Let's go back up there and do this again. R equals 2.
You gotta parentheses.
That should be okay, because I'm asking for the year of that. Let's just try it again. R is 2. First name equals letters cells. Oh, row 2. It is column 2, but that's going to be column B here. It's running and done running. What did it do over here? It gave me 3 successful dates. Let's see, this probably is going to go to my BYU mail. It takes a while to come through the Gmail, so let me just log in there. Mail.byu.edu. Sign in. Here we have those 3 messages that came from me. Dear Tom, when I heard about the trouble you had with your 1995 Toyota Camry, I was deeply troubled. Assigned to your case and wanted to give you my contact information, whatever. Transportation Safety Bureau is currently evaluating the Toyota anti-skid system for a possible recall. If you would like to provide any more information about the incident you experienced back in 1999, please don't hesitate to contact me. Pretty good email message. Except this part being in all capitals. That's a giveaway. And we can put that into lowercase. We can lowercase that. That'd be pretty easy to do. In-class exercise, lowercase that. I'm just kidding. We can do that. Okay, that's sending email. Questions? Yes?
It's not good. It's just that mine didn't change the model year and failure and everything.
So it has just the tags still?
Yeah.
So one thing to check is make sure, and I typed this wrong initially, but look right here. The first time we do the replace, we're setting message equal to replace looking at template. And then every other one after that, we're looking back at the message. And I initially copied it without changing it to message. We went back and changed it. Probably means your model year got changed, but the rest of them didn't. That's sending email. Is this pretty powerful? That's pretty powerful. There's some restrictions that Gmail has. I don't think Gmail lets you send more than 500 messages a day through your Gmail account. What's that? Yeah, I found that out. You can't just go crazy. And I think they limit it even more if you're sending it not through the interface, but through this approach. I think you're limited to 100 a day. So why did they put that limitation on? People were abusing it. So you might end up, in terms of doing lots of these, maybe 100 days is enough, but you might end up needing to go to a different outbound mail server to do those kind of volume you have. Okay, we've got 10 minutes to see how to send a text message as well. It'll take a little while to run, so here's what I'd like to have happen at the very end. I would like it to actually send me a text message. So after the loop here, I'm going to say, send me a text message. So here's what I want. I'll reset the subject to say complete. And the message to equal master. I have done your bidding and await further orders. I like my technology to use the language of proper subservience. Okay, so here's the trick. To send emails using Excel, to do it for free anyway, we are going to need to know the carrier of that the text message is using, that the phone is using. Because we're going to rely on the provider's email to text gateway to be able to dispatch this message. We're going to send a properly formatted email to the right address, and the carrier will convert that into a text message and send it along. And so if I go back to Excel, there's a System Info tab that has the popular carriers here. If your carrier isn't listed here, you can probably just Google and find what the address is for their email to text gateway. So my provider is Sprint, so I'm going to use messaging.sprintpcs.com. And it's just going to be the 10-digit telephone number at that. I just realized how all these telecom companies, these telemarketing companies are getting my email address, my telephone number. I'm publishing it on the web. That's what they're getting. They call me 2 or 3 times a week. Hey, your business qualifies for $250,000. Don't you want to take out some money? No. What I really want to do is get off your mailing list. Can you help me with that? About half the time they just hang up when I say that. Okay, so I'm just going to come here. Okay, so debug.print send Gmail. Who do I want to send it to? I want to send it to my 10-digit number, 801-372-0683 at messaging.sprintpcs.com. From username, password, subject, body, message. So let me go ahead and put my phone to make sound. And make a lot of sound. As much as it's going to make. I have to be quiet to listen. Should send me those 3 messages again. I'll just do this. If R is greater than 1, exit do. I'm going to send one of those. Send this. Credentials. Looks like it sent it. Is it true? Yeah, it sent it. There's my text message. I know you can't see it, but subject complete, master, I have done your bidding and await further orders. So, that's the way that we can have Excel send a text message to us, is just send an email through the email to text gateway. Usually about now the question comes up, what if you don't know the carrier? Well, then you got to find out the carrier. Well, what would happen if you sent that number to the Verizon email to text gateway? What would they do with it? They would ignore it. So could you just send it to everyone? Yeah, you could, but that would be rude. Find out what the carrier is. Anyway, questions? Yeah.
Can you also get response from the person who writes back?
Oh yeah. I'll respond. Take the rest of the day. Take the rest of the day off. Good work. Take the rest of the day off. Take the. Oh, I'm talking about phone. Rest of the day off. Period. You deserve it. Period. Send. Right. Just responded. Now I sent that using my gov.allen credentials. So let's try and figure out where gov.allen is. That's gov.allen. And I see I've gotten quite a few from you. Here, not that many. Here now is the response from my, not from my phone number, it's from a different phone number. But take the rest of the day off, you deserve it. Now, if I wanted to get that back into Excel and realize what the response was, that's a different game altogether, because now I've got to be able to read messages from my Gmail account. That's not a pretty picture. In fact, if you really do need to get responses to emails back into Excel to process, then it's probably worth the time to set up Outlook to be able to be your mail client. Because when we're working with Outlook, we actually just get hooks into the Outlook functionality, and there's objects, and it has VBA built into Outlook. You can either write it in Outlook or in Excel from Outlook, and so you've got a lot more flexibility there. But for sending email, I would stay away from Outlook, unless you already use it. It's not too bad. Don't install Outlook just to send, because this will send pretty well. But if you have to read what comes back, Outlook's probably the way to go. Questions? Yeah.
How can you get past the limit 100 per day?
How can you get past the 100 per day? So use a different service besides Gmail. Use multiple accounts at Gmail. Those are the only two ways I know. Other questions? Okay, folks, we got 2 more days and then the final exam. I'll send you an email out tomorrow, hopefully. Oh, maybe I'll send it with this. No, probably not. To remind you about that, and that you can take the final exam during the final exam period if you want to. Thanks for coming. Class dismissed.